this is not your typical photo editing tutorial. Instead of showing you around a certain program, explaining where you find these settings, what these settings do, this is going to be more abstract. Basically, I'll be explaining some technicals, but focusing on the more creative side of it. Why you want to edit your photos one way instead of another. In other words, how the editing of your photo can affect the emotion and the story that the image portrays. Hello, I'm Noah from Anything Cameras, the channel that focuses on helping you improve your filming and photography, and I've already explained what I'm doing, so let's start off with an example. Here's a photo. What would you say the emotion of this photo is? The emotion that the subject of this photo is feeling? Probably you said fear. Maybe it doesn't look quite convincing, but he looks like he's at least pretending to be scared. But now, look at the same photo but edited differently. Suddenly, it just seems like the guy's being goofy, right? It looks more of a happy photo because it was edited differently. The whole story and the emotion was changed with the dragging of a few sliders. So when it comes to editing and getting emotion across in the photo, you have two main factors. Those are color and exposure. There are a couple others that I'm going to talk about a little bit later on. But let's start with color. When in editing, you have several different controls that affect your color. It's one of the most important things you're going to be editing. One of those sliders that allows you to adjust the color in your image is a saturation. This is how vibrant, how much pop is added to the colors to saturate them. And you could have, at the very extreme end, extremely saturated colors that just look awful, or at the other extreme, you have the black and white, where there's no color at all. Now, the more you saturate colors, the more happy, the more, almost a more lively feel to the image. There seems to be more life in it, especially if there's some type of greenery in that photo. Whereas if you begin to desaturate the colors, then as you desaturate them until you get to the black and white spectrum, you're gonna have less life. It'll be a little bit more subdued, less energetic. In the example between the happy photo and scared photo, that was one of the things I did, was reduce the saturation quite a bit, actually. Another thing you can adjust in the colors of your image is what the primary color is, the color that takes up the most of the image. This isn't always a very clear thing. Maybe it's just a very colorful image or the opposite. But in the happy photo, we have lots of greens, some orange from the sun, and this again gives off a feeling of more life, more energy, like it's a pleasant summer day. But when we introduce more blue into the image to make it colder, like I did in that scared photo, suddenly that life, again, like with the saturation, is starting to be brought away. We're having colder tones, which feels more cold, less inviting, and a little bit more scary, perhaps. But then we also have crossover with exposure, so that we can adjust the exposures of different colors. For instance, in the scary photo, I brought the exposure of the blues quite a bit down, so that in the sky, it was less bright, less like a pleasant summer day, like in the warm, bright, happy photo. Then when it actually comes to exposure, we have lots of different controls here. First off, the overall exposure of the image. If you have a brighter image, like in the happier photo, then it will seem, again, you're going to be seeing a theme here, it will seem more energetic, more bright, more happy. Whereas if you begin to underexpose your image, it can have an effect in combination with the colors that might make it seem more sad, or just more subdued, or more intimidating, or more scary. Then you also have the contrast of the image. Perhaps the shadows, or the highlights of the image. In the scary image, I brought the shadows down so that there was more contrast, there was less detail, it was a little bit darker. And in the happier image, I brought it back up so you can see the detail in those areas. And so that it seems more bright and more energetic, I guess. I'm gonna be reusing these adjectives quite a bit here. And then another thing I did, which I'm gonna put in with the exposure of the image, is in the scary image, I added a heavy vignette. So this darkened the corners and the edges of the image so that your focus was brought in onto the subject, and so that, again, it seemed darker. But But then I mentioned there are some other smaller factors that can have an effect on the story and emotion of your image. One of these is the crop of your image. If you choose to exclude a certain part of the image, that may remove part of the story of your image, or put the focal point somewhere else, perhaps, and that can certainly have an effect. Another one is effects like vignette or grain. If you have a grainier image, the emotion will seem a little more rough, a little less smooth and calm. But anyway, that's our photo editing tutorial. As I said, it wasn't your typical one, so I hope you enjoyed. And by the way, in the near future, we're making a whole course about photography, the basics of photography, that'll cover kind of all the technicals, story, more topics, go more in depth. And if you want to be notified about the process and where that currently is in production, you can sign up for emails below. I promise it'll be infrequent, it won't be very spammy, and you'll just get occasional updates on the process of that course, as well as promotions.